I was Hanny Usher, but Rico from Street Scores, and as promised, even though it's pretty late right now, and I am busy with a lot of other stuff going on outside of football, I'm still coming with a breakdown and analysis of what just happened in this third preseason game. The preseason finale against the Patriots just happened a few hours ago. Of course, KJ Henry and Fedarian Mathis ball, but not more than this one other defensive lineman that we definitely got to talk about. Also, Martavis Bryant got a touchdown. Is that enough for him to potentially make the final 53-man roster? I'm going to explain why. And we have a lot of things to talk about. Of course, this is the position group by position group breakdown. So we got to talk about every single position group that contributed to this game. And, you know, granted, I can't see everything and I don't have access to the all 22 footage yet. So we're going to miss some players. I'm going to let you know when I'm not exactly sure, but I'm going to do my best to try to break down everything that was very notable from this game. And of course, try to surmise who more than likely will or will not make this roster due to what happened in this game. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stay tuned because I am a one-stop shop for everything Commanders, man. Draft, free agency, this entire season, just like I live stream during every preseason game. I will be doing the same exact thing, live streaming every regular season game, and I'm speaking it into existence, live streaming every postseason game as well. Let's get it, man. It's a really exciting season. I can't wait to see what the starters actually look like out there because we've only gotten glimpses of them, and even then, guys like Bobby Wagner and Jonathan Allen never played a single snap in the preseason, so I can't wait to see what we look like fully loaded up and everything like that. But instead of getting ahead of myself, let's go ahead and dive into this video, talk about what happened in this week 3 preseason game. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so first of all, it's nice to finally get a preseason win, even though, like I always say, when it comes to the preseason, we are not here to win. We're here to evaluate. First and foremost, winning is cool at the end of it. I mean, ending that Baltimore Ravens legendary preseason streak was fun, especially the way that we went about it with the game-winning kick and everything like that. We celebrated as if we won the Super Bowl. That was cool. But at the end of the day, man, wins and losses do not matter in the preseason at all, man. Not at all. But it's still cool to finally get a preseason when we finished 1-2 after a 20-10 win against the Patriots, where it looked like we were destined to not score a single point after the way the first half ended. So that's still pretty cool. Injuries wise, I mean, nothing that I know of. Now we kind of have to wait for Dan Quinn to probably speak to the media at some point this upcoming week. But other than that, I don't know of anything. I didn't necessarily see anything that was obvious on the field. So we'll see. But just, I mean, granted, I didn't notice Jordan McGee got hurt in that first preseason game against the Jets, and he's been out since, and he'll probably even miss an extended amount of regular season time because of it as well. He may even end up on temporary IR for all I know. So I mean, you just never know, but we didn't see anything obvious. There was nobody carted off. There was nobody on the field like really wincing in pain for an extended period of time that I noticed. But of course, I probably missed a lot. I saw the game live all the way through, and then I tried to go back and look at some highlights to kind of be able to at least have enough information to be able to do this video. But of course, I haven't watched the all 22 film yet, so who knows, I may have missed something. But just to let you know, even before the game started, we had 34 players not playing tonight. Technically 35, because for some reason Nick Allegretti wasn't on this list. But wide receiver wise, De'Ami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Terry McLaurin, and Jamison Crowder. I told y'all this during the live stream before the game even started, that Jamison Crowder not playing shows that his spot is a roster lock. He's making this team as like a backup slot guy, but more so because he's our starting punt returner. I'm assuming that's why Jamison Crowder is a lock. They didn't even throw him out there in the third preseason game, which means they truly value his health, which means that they really like him. Like they're not even going to throw him out there to risk it. Then cornerbacks wise, Mike Sanders still, Emmanuel Forbes, Michael Davis, and Benjamin St. Juste. Obviously, everybody else had to go out there and prove themselves, and we're going to talk about them. Noah Igbenogany, Tariq Castro-Fields, a lot of these other corners. We're going to talk about what type of day they had. Then linebackers wise, Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, and Jordan McGee. Jordan McGee, no surprise surprised because he's literally hurt. So even if he were healthy, I'm not even sure if he would have played because he's probably literally linebacker 3 right behind Frankie Louvo and Bobby Wagner. But we'll see when he gets back healthy where he is on the depth chart. I mean, just because of how much time he's missed as a 5th round rookie, the majority, it seems like, of training camp and pretty much almost all of the preseason at this point, he may be behind a guy like Anthony Pittman on the depth chart. But Anthony Pittman, even though he didn't look good today as a linebacker, he is a special teams ace. He was arguably the best special teams player that the Lions had. So he's making this team, but they still throw him out there to kind of see what he can show as a linebacker. Didn't look too great. We'll talk about that later. Then quarterbacks wise, Jaden Daniels and Sam Hartman didn't play. Jaden Daniels, obviously the starter, would not play. Sam Hartman, they said that he is getting back healthy. He's pretty good to go. He's recovered from his shoulder injury. I think he even participated in team drills, but he didn't practice enough to where they felt comfortable throwing him out there in the preseason. This regime is very precautionary when it comes to things like that. They're always going to err on the side of caution. So even though Sam Hartman probably was healthy enough to go out there, they don't want to throw him out there without having the proper amount of reps in the week leading up to the preseason game, to where, his body may, take some type of force or contact and may end up in shock, maybe sustain an injury because he didn't get that chance to ramp up. Then defensive line wise, Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Johnny Newton, and Cleveland Farrell will all out. Now, Johnny Newton out because of injury, but even so, he's a lock to make the roster, so we're not worried about that. But Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, and Cleveland Farrell are all starters. Well, technically, Dante Fowler is like a situational pass rusher, so he's technically not a starter, but he's a guy that's obviously a roster lock. Everybody else had to go out there and play and basically go out there and show why they deserve to make the team. Even guys like John Ridgeway, Fadarian Mathis, KJ Henry, and I don't even remember if Javonte John Baptiste was out there. I did not notice him, but that's probably because the other 3 names that I just mentioned flashed so much that they probably overshadowed him, but we'll see. We'll see if Javonte John Baptiste, due to the fact that those other guys flashed and he didn't necessarily, maybe he ends up going to the practice squad. This third preseason game may have strong implications as to who will make the final 53-man roster, who will end up on the practice squad, who will just straight up end up getting cut, which is really interesting. Running backs wise, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, the only people that didn't go out there, which means it was a competition. I mean, if we're only keeping 3 running backs, that's a competition between Jeremy McNichols, Michael Wiley, and Chris Rodriguez for that 3rd spot. Maybe we keep 4, who knows? But as of right now, I'm just going to assume we only keep 3. We're going to talk about that when we get to the running back part of this video. Safety wise, Jeremy Chin, Quan Martin, and Percy Butler. This is really interesting. Now, if you've been following my training camp breakdowns for the past few weeks, you would know that Percy Butler was probably a roster lock. I mean, off the fact that Jeremy Chin and Quan Martin are obviously a starting strong safety and free safety, but I've said multiple times, and other reporters have confirmed this and backed me up, people that have gone to the practice have said that when there is a 3rd safety on the field, out there with the starters, out there with like guys like Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, Jonathan Allen, all of those guys, when they're out there with the starting defense and there's a 3rd safety on the field, it's almost always Percy Butler. So you already knew off of that he was a lock to make the roster. And plus, his tackling is a positive attribute that he has going for him right now. Now, granted, in that Jets preseason game, that running back was truck sticking him and he was falling on his back. But at the end of the day, the running back was going down. You can't say so much for Derek Forrest and Jeremy Reeves that were out there missing tackles throughout these preseason games, man. Especially Jeremy Reeves missing quite a bit of tackles in the preseason games. So Percy Butler, yeah, we can laugh at him, hee-ha-ha, about him getting ran over and truck stick, but at the end of the day, the tackle was made. He was getting ran over, but the running back was falling to the ground, and I'm pretty sure the coaching staff liked that. I talked about that in my review video just like this one, but after the week 2 preseason game against the Dolphins, I talked about like, hey, I know he's getting ran over, but the tackle is being made, and I'm pretty sure the coaches are acknowledging that. They're saluting him for that. And look, lo and behold, this guy is the only other safety that's safe along with Jeremy Chin and Quan Martin. Derek Forrest, Jeremy Reeves, even my boy Tyler Owens is out there playing for their careers in that 3rd preseason game. The defensive line wise, Tyler Biadasz, your starting center, Andrew Wiley, starting right tackle, Trent Scott, I guess your backup tackle. Brandon Coleman projected to be a starting left tackle once healthy. Samuel Cosme, your starting right guard. Khalid Lucas, your backup swing tackle. Well, technically just your swing tackle. Now, I mean, backup swing tackle is almost redundant, but everybody else fighting for a roster spot. Now, I think Chris Paul may be relatively safe because he can not only play guard, but he's shown you that he can play a little bit of right tackle and handle that pretty well, fairly well. Ricky Stromberg, I'm rooting for him to make the roster. I'm just not sure if this team actually really likes him. And then tight end wise, Ben Sinnott, Zach Ertz, John Bates. That's it for the tight ends. And if they only keep 3, that's your 3. Will they potentially take a roster spot, trying to finalize to this 53 man, go from 90 to 53, take a roster spot from one of these other positions in favor of keeping a fourth tight end. At this point, I doubt it with the way that Cole Turner looked out there, unless Kosi Yankov has shown them enough, but I don't think he has. So we're going to get to that when we get to the tight end part of this video. But I just really want to emphasize the fact that, again, pretty interesting that Percy Butler, even though you should know by now, shouldn't be a surprise, but interesting that Percy Butler's safe. Jamison Crowder's safe as your starting punt returner. But also Michael Davis, man. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of great things from him in training camp, but the fact that he didn't play shows that they really like him. I mean, they did sign him as a free agent. So that, I mean, there that goes. And then again, with 35 players out, it's kind of like we're going into this game, who gets the last 18 spots? Because with 35 players out, that sounds like 35 roster spots on lock. Dan Quinn basically said that it was only like up to 10 that were up for grabs in the game, but just by the fact that there were 35 guys that were out, you know for a physac that those 35 pure locks, you don't have to worry about them. All of the guys whose names I read to you on that list. So the last 18, really interesting. And I'm not gonna lie, we're probably looking at other rosters to see who gets cut, like at receiver, maybe even offensive line, linebacker, and things like that. So it may have actually been less than 18 as far as who can actually even have a chance of making this team. We'll see though. Also, before we get into all of the position groups and things like that, I mean, Lord have mercy. So many flags in that game, man. Even the refs were sick of it. I've never heard a referee, or at least never noticed a referee say once again in their call. He was talking about the penalty. He literally said once again, blah, 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 against the blah, 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 and all of that. I mean, I've never, even they were sick of it. They were ready to go home. They were ready to be with their wife and kids. They were sick of it as well. I'm not mad at them. I was booing them the first half, like, yo, that's tic-tac. He stopped, chill out. And then it got to a certain point where I started to feel sorry for them. Like, man, this is really sloppy football. You can't blame the refs for all of this at all. Now moving on to the quarterbacks. Of course, Jaden Daniels and Sam Hartman didn't play. Marcus Mariota did not play either from what I noticed. I don't think he ever played in there, even though they didn't include him in that list of the like roster locks who weren't going to play even before the game started. I don't believe Marcus Mariota played. But either way, out of the people that I really noticed, Jeff Driscoll started off pretty hot. I'm not going to lie. He was on fire to start. And then he just threw a ridiculous interception that was completely inexcusable. We were starting to talk about at a certain point, what would it take for Jeff Driscoll to surpass Marcus Mariota in the depth chart to become quarterback 2, the direct backup to Jaden Daniels. And I was already saying to the live chat at that moment that I don't think there is really enough he can do in this preseason, just within like a 3-game span, that can make that big of a difference for him to surpass Marcus Mariota in the depth chart. And then shortly after I said that, he threw that terrible interception. He was staring down the receiver, and the receiver was never open. I mean, it was terrible in all accounts. Like, I still don't understand to this moment why he even threw that pass. I just don't even know what he possibly saw there. So yeah, man, we were already talking about, I mean, Jeff Driscoll, I doubt he's able to make it to QB2 no matter what he does in this game. Then he threw the interception, so it was over with. But at the end of the day, he finished 12 of 18 for 73 yards with a bad interception, of course. JP Finley said, I think he's still on the roster, though, because he noted the fact that Marcus Mariota's been dealing with injury, and Sam Hartman has been dealing with an injury as well, both of them. And you probably need 3 quarterbacks. We'll see. I think it was Ben Standig that said, man, just keep 2 quarterbacks and keep it pushing, because especially with the whole practice squad and the whole new quarterback rules, you can keep 3 active for game days, even if it doesn't count towards your 53. It's a weird situation there. But either way, I don't know, man. Jeff Driscoll, I'm not sure if he did enough, but at the same time, Marcus Mariota and Sam Hartman have been banged up. Maybe they keep them just in case the injuries get worse, even though I'm hearing that they've been recovering, they've been participating in practices. Maybe they're not healthy enough to trust them. And then moving on to Trace McSorley, man, he did a good job today, man. I mean, shouts out to him to moving linebackers with his eyes and things like that. You could clearly tell that first preseason game was a shock to him. He had no time to practice. We literally signed him the day before we had the joint practice against the Dolphins, and then the morning of the joint practice was his first time even shaking hands with Dan Quinn and introducing himself to him. And then he barely even got any snaps in that joint practice, and then they threw him out there to the Wolves in that Dolphins preseason game late in that game. And of course he made mistakes. I mean, I think the very first play was like a bobble snap, then after that it was a sack. I mean, and those 2 things may have not even necessarily been his fault, but it just showed he was rusty. Now, I'm not saying Trace McSorley is a good quarterback in any way. If you go back and look at what he did for the Arizona Cardinals, when our offensive coordinator right now, Cliff Kingsbury, was the Cardinals head coach at the time, he was not a good quarterback. He showed flashes, but he was not a good quarterback. But he did deserve an honest chance at, like, you know, maybe get a week worth of practice and then go see what he looks like in a preseason game. I feel like what he showed today, well, last night in that preseason game against the Patriots, is a more accurate assessment of who he is rather than what he did against the Dolphins. I truly believe that. You could definitely tell he was more comfortable. And it just seemed like really the entire offense just played with more confidence and spirit when Trace was out there, man. We had no offense out there, really until he got out there. And just like that, shouts out to Zach Selby for this, the Commanders had the lead at a certain point after Martavis Bryant drew a pass interference, Michael Wiley dove for the score, and then Washington was up with less than 10 minutes left, up 13-10. Trace McSorley brought that life into the offense, brought that life into the team. That game was so boring until he went out there and started doing this thing. And then he had that moment too where he's lowered his shoulder into that cornerback, that a ZZ Hearn guy, where he completely like knocked him over into the sideline. Then he gave him a stare down, sideline going crazy, ballistic, even more ballistic than they did when Tress Way had that punt coverage tackle. I believe it was against the Jets in that preseason game. I believe it was. But either way, man, the team loved it. I mean, he just did so many things to spark fires into the team, converting third downs, running over a cornerback, and then staring them down afterwards. Trace really brought some personality and some real excitement to that preseason game, man. And I feel like that's worth something. Shouts out to Grant Paulson, because he said it's probably not relevant to the 53-man roster, but seeing Trace McSorley leave it all on the field where he grew up going as a fan and everything, because he is literally from Ashburn. Not even just from Virginia in general, literally Ashburn. Where he orchestrated a 20-point half, ran for 40 yards, threw for 125 yards, and had a score for a touchdown to Martavis Bryant, man. That was the most exciting part of the entire game by far. I agree. I don't think Trace McSorley will make this team, but I believe somebody's going to pick him up after what he did tonight, man, because that's what the preseason is for. You aren't just auditioning for the team that you're currently on at that time. You're also showing the rest of the NFL what you could do, and I would be fairly surprised if another team doesn't at least give him an opportunity off of what he showed in that final preseason game. Now moving on to the running backs. Now, even though I think Michael Wiley did have a great game, I think they still may lean towards Jeremy McNichols. I'm not gonna lie. Wiley had the more impressive game today for sure. I feel like Michael Wiley outplayed Jeremy McNichols, but McNichols had a pretty good game as well. And I don't think Wiley did enough to surpass McNichols on the depth chart, because I don't think they were dead even coming into this game. I think Jeremy McNichols is above him on the depth chart, and I'm not sure if Michael Wiley did enough greatness to surpass him. I personally love Michael Wiley though. I'm rooting for him. If it were up to me, I'd probably choose him over Jeremy McNichols because I like the flashes I saw. But you never know. Maybe they keep 4 running backs. I don't think they will, though. And also on top of that, I mean, even if they keep 4, I think it will be Jeremy McNichols and Michael Wiley. I don't think Chris Rodriguez makes this team. Shouts out to RVA Point of Views for my dog over there. Make sure you follow him on Twitter and subscribe to him on YouTube and everything, man. He said, I love this back. Beautiful chip block on that drive and capped it off with the end zone call. He ended up with a touchdown and everything. Ken Johannesson even tweeted, my boy over there, make sure you follow him on Twitter as well. He said he's likely on the roster with the 53. They feel like Michael Wiley has done enough. Shouts out to Chris Russell. He said Michael Wiley turns the corner for the score and the Commanders have the lead. He stood out in the games in the physical downhill runs with bursts. And then Grant Paulson said, I like Michael Wiley. He runs hard and has got some juice. He couldn't have had a better August to help his case, and I agree. Again, I'm not sure if it was enough for him to necessarily make the team, but Michael Wiley did everything in his power to potentially make this team. If he does, he truly earned it, man. Then wide receiver wise, and I'm not going to lie, for a large part of that game, especially the first half, it was really hard to evaluate the skill position players. That's including the wide receivers, running backs, all of them, because the O-line and the quarterbacks was just selling at times. And poor receivers and running backs, I mean, they didn't even really have a chance to show us what they could do the majority, especially of the first half. I mean, they were just out there really just running cardio at a certain point, man. It was bad. But we can start with Martavis Bryant, since he's probably the wide receiver who increased his stock the most in this game from that touchdown that he had. But even just outside of that, he also made other plays. And it's crazy because I don't believe he got a single snap in the first half. But then when his number was called in that second half, he went out there and made plays. Remember, in that preseason game against the Dolphins, he forced a fumble on the DB after an interception to give us the ball back. I mean, he's just been, no matter what, he stood out in both of the preseason games he's had since he's been here. And then he also drew a pass interference and even scored his first touchdown in 7 years in his game. And so it wasn't even just a touchdown. He also forced a pass interference on the DB to keep the drive going. And that touchdown was a big boy touchdown now. I mean, that was like a completely just a box out, go up, go out and get it, and that's it. He did no separation, no real time to even really get any real separation. He just used his size and made a play. And that's why if he makes this team, that's literally why he would make this team. Shouts out to Grant Paulson, because I agree. I would be very tempted to keep Martavis Bryant if I were Adam Peters. You don't just have a bunch of people like him in your wide receiver room. You lack that type of size and big guy athleticism. Gives you some goal line and red area options. It's not like you've got 6 wide receivers definitively better than him as well. I completely agree with all of that. I'm not saying Martavis Bryant will make the team, but you definitely don't have another 6 guys ahead of him that is just clear cut. These guys are better than him. And more importantly, especially if you don't keep Bryson Tremaine, he would be your only big, tall, red zone receiver on roster. And I feel like that niche may be enough. And then also, speaking of Bryson Tremaine, I've been rooting for him, man. I really want him to make this roster, but 2 penalties does not help. Now, even though the holding was more of like a timing play design issue where, like, you know, they threw like a screen, kind of like an underneath throw, and he was already blocking too quickly. So, like, I can see that's a penalty that may not necessarily be his fault. But the false start that he had after that was pretty unacceptable. And then you also didn't go out there and make enough plays in this game on offense to necessarily like override our memories of the penalties that you had. Meanwhile, Martavis Bryant had a touchdown and drew a pass interference call, so Martavis flashed and Bryson Tremaine just simply didn't. But I believe Bryson Tremaine has had such a great offseason training camp in the other 2 preseason games and joint practices especially. Again, that Jets joint practice where we didn't have a lot of bright spots, Bryson Tremaine was one of the brightest spots we had. In a joint practice where barely anybody was making plays, Bryson Tremaine was making plays. I feel like that may hold enough weight. Dan Quinn even said it himself. It's not like this 3rd preseason game is just a final exam worth 100% of your grade. We're grading based on what you've done throughout the entire offseason, especially starting with training camp, and they're looking for consistency. Bryson Tremaine, on top of the fact that he's made plays throughout this entire process and the fact that he's also pretty good on special teams, maybe he has a chance of making the roster. Then you have Mitchell Tinsley and Byron Pringle, who made some good catches today. They were moving the chains, getting first down receptions back and forth between the 2. I'm not sure if it's enough for them to be safe to make this roster. I highly doubt it. But they made some plays, man, and they showed what they could do. Maybe other teams will pick them up if we don't keep them. Also, shouts out to George Carmi for this. He said the team is trying really hard to make Casimir Allen a thing. However, he hasn't made a significant impact. I'm guessing they sneak him onto the practice squad. I completely agree, man. I mean, the last preseason game against the Dolphins, he fumbled. And then this preseason game, he looked indecisive with the ball. They're trying so hard. Even in the practices in between that Dolphins preseason game and then this preseason game that just happened tonight against the Patriots, those practices in between, they were literally throwing them out there with the running backs. Like, please, just show us something, man. We're trying so hard to keep you on this team, and it's just not working, man. And then lastly, shouts out to my Georgia dog, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint. He had a great catch in the second half. It won't be enough for him to make the team, but I'm still happy to see it, and I had to make sure I said it because that's my Georgia dog right there. It's sad, though, because he has so much momentum coming out of that first day of rookie mini camps. Then he pulled a hamstring, and he just never caught back up. He fell behind, and he just stayed behind. Then tight end-wise, Cole Turner had 2 straight drops to kill a pretty good drive where, like, we actually had some momentum going. I think that was one of the Jeff Driscoll drives where, you know, he wasn't perfect today, but that was one of his better drives, and Cole Turner pretty much just killed the drive. Now, granted, both of the throws were ugly. The first one was fairly contested and wasn't very accurate, and then the second one was a little off. But both of them should have been caught point blank, period. No excuses. Especially since they cut my dog Armani Rogers to keep you. So show me something, please, to rationalize that move, man. Please, just show me something to like, okay, that's why they kept you over my dog Armani Rogers, man. Something. I mean, I just can't forget about him dropping that easy pass against the Dolphins, which led to an interception that wasn't Jaden Daniels' fault. It was literally thrown right to his chest where the numbers were, and then he got hit, popped the ball up in the air, and then it ended up being an interception that, again, wasn't Jaden Daniels' fault. And then 2 days later, in the preseason game against the Dolphins, he did it again. Trace McSorley was the victim this time. Threw it to him, went right in between his hands, right through him, and then the DB was able to pick it off. That's where Martavis Bryant knocked the ball out to force a fumble on that DB that got the interception that gave us the ball back. So Cole Turner not making plays, Martavis Bryant making plays. But either way, man, come on, dog. Like, at this point, you're better off just playing DB. When a quarterback throws you the ball, just spike it, man. Just go ahead and swing that ball down instead of trying to catch it. Because whenever you try to make a catch, it seems like you just end up bobbling it, dropping it, whatever. It leads to an interception. So at this point, statistically, quarterback rating-wise, when you're throwing the ball to Cole Turner, at this point, just hope he spikes it. At the end of the day, just live to play another play, I guess. But later on in the day, he did end up having a nice positive play. And he had like a really good catch over the middle of the field for like 25 yards, and he took on some contact there. Took a pretty big hit to get it. But then he was called for a holding, and that sucked too, man. I mean, every time it seemed like we started to have some momentum, man, he would just ruin it, man. It was bad. Shouts out to Zach Selby. He said, I've liked how far Cole Turner has come as a blocker throughout camp. I completely agree. I never thought that at any point in his career he would become as good of a blocker as he is right now. I just never thought he could develop into that guy. I thought he was one-dimensional. But at the same time, he's out here dropping passes. Shouts out to Zach Selby again to continue. He's been playing hard and trying to prove that he deserves a roster spot, but those were some really tough drops. And again, he had a holding penalty on a really positive play for the offense. I think it was like a Michael Wiley run or something like that. And then it had to get called back. And again, he had a really good catch over the middle of the field, took a big hit to get it. But I don't think it made up for all of the drops you've had for the past few weeks, man. I just don't think it's enough. I don't think they keep a fourth tight end to keep you over keeping an additional offensive lineman, linebacker, or a secondary player. I just really don't see it, or a receiver. Then offensive lines wise, I mean, first half was a little ugly, especially in the run game, but the second half offensive line, whoever comprised of it, did their thing. I'm going to have to go back and scout like individual performances later on, maybe tomorrow, sometime this week or something like that. But for now, I don't remember exactly who was out there doing specifically what on the offensive line. I got to rewatch the game for that. But I just know the first half was ugly. The second half was better. Now, moving on to the defensive side of the ball, man, I mean, we need to go back to that first quarter, that first drive, dog. That boy Antonio Gibson had a revenge game against us. He was killing us in the run game and the passing game. I mean, he literally either ran or was targeted the very first 5 plays in a row for the Patriots to start the game. I mean, that was like a statement. They literally did. I'm pretty sure they did that on purpose, like literally for his benefit. And I respect the Patriots for doing that. And I respect the fact that Antonio Gibson probably wanted to do it, probably even asked to do it. I thought that was pretty cool, man. Shouts out to Antonio Gibson. I wish the best for him. Remember, we have some former Commanders over there. Joey Sly, the kicker, Antonio Gibson, the running back, and Jacoby Brissett, the quarterback. Speaking of Jacoby Brissett, I feel sorry for him, man. I mean, that O-line was literally Willie beaming in him from any given Sunday. I mean, they were literally setting them up for failure. And then even receivers were dropping passes trying to show off. I forgot which receiver it was, but instead of going up for 2 hands on a really well-thrown ball, like 30 yards down the field by Jacoby Brissett on the sideline, receiver tried to show off and catch it with 1 hand. They ended up not catching it. So he was getting sold, and he even ended up getting hurt because of it as well. And you know why he got hurt? Because that defensive line was dominant today, man. In that first half, our backup defensive line was dominating the Patriots' starting offensive line. I want to make sure people know that. That was our backup defensive line doing that against the Patriots' starting offensive line. But sadly, the back 7 was so bad that they just kept allowing receivers to get open so quickly that the Patriots just kept moving the ball anyway, getting first down after first down. But our backup D-line situation looks elite, man. Not gonna lie. I mean, Drake May, when he was out there, especially, I mean, there was like one drive where he went 5 for 6, 71 yards, and a touchdown, despite having 2 really bad snaps that put New England behind the chains a couple of times. They converted some long third downs. He had completions of 29, 18, and 6, moved well in the pocket. He was killing it. Even on top of the fact, I mean, I don't know how he did it with the way that the offensive line was setting them up for failure, man. They set him up and Jacoby Brissett up for failure. And again, Jacoby Brissett even got hurt because of it. Now, let's speak of this defensive line. Let's talk about who was so dominant on this defensive line and how they did it. Well, KJ Henry, boy, he had himself a game. Now, granted, that sack that he had in the first quarter was an unblocked sack, but he still balled out all game from what I saw. Maybe the all-22 every snap footage shows a different story, but he was flashing, man. I mean, there was a point where they had him as like a 3-tech defensive tackle at a certain point in the game, man. And he even forced a holding penalty from the 3-tech defensive tackle spot. So he was making plays from both the edge and the interior. Well done, dog. I ain't gonna lie. I don't like Clemson, but he's a cool guy, man. Then Fadarian Mathis also had a great game as well. I'm sitting around looking like, yo, when he start hooping like this, where's this Fadarian Mathis been for the past few years? Somebody must have told him the right thing a couple of weeks ago, because up until 2 weeks ago, I thought he may not even make this team. I thought he was just a waste of a second-round pick, but then he went out there and had 2 great preseason games in a row. I don't feel like a lot of people noticed, and maybe he flashed more in this game. You could argue that this game was even better, but he looked good against the Dolphins as well. Both against the Dolphins and the Patriots, he had good games, and now I'm curious with what this coaching staff is going to do with him. Are they going to keep him? I'm not sure. I mean, Mathis had the Patriots starting center nervous at one point. That boy was nervous. That drive where Drake May had the 3 bobble snaps. One was because Mathis just straight up bum rushed them so bad. And then another one was arguably because Mathis literally had him nervous after the bum rush. I mean, that boy was trying to basically give Drake May the ball and then hurry up and get his hands ready. But he would do it too fast. He was trying to hurry up and prepare for Mathis coming, but he would like try to throw it back and then hurry up and put his hands up. And it led to bobble snaps. So Mathis, man, I mean, making a true impact. And then even later on in the game, he batted down a pass at the line of scrimmage in the second half. I mean, great game all around. It wasn't just a couple of plays. He was consistently good. And shouts out to Ref the District. He said Mathis keeps popping. First time that's ever been said. And I agree, man. I don't know what's gotten into him these last couple of weeks. I don't know if he Space Jam away somebody's powers. I don't know. Maybe Johnny Newton is like, well, I'm hurt, so you can go ahead and use my superpowers, but make sure you give it back to me by the time I get back healthy. And I mean, that's the only explanation for why Phidarian Mathis looks this good after looking that bad for so long. But out of every defensive lineman that had a great day today, maybe nobody had a better day than John Ridgway. KJ Henry, crazy. Phidarian Mathis, great. But John Ridgway, man, first of all, the hustle on one of those run plays where he tracked the running back down, when he was originally on the opposite side of the play, away from the play, he didn't give up, and his effort led to a pretty big tackle for loss. And then even beyond that, he was just dominant. After he blew up a few plays, both run and pass, getting more tackles for losses and pressures of QB hits, they had to start double teaming him. They started double teaming John Ridgway at a certain point in that game. And then just to go back real quick, there was that moment where he killed a guard and had pushed them back like 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage and then got the running back down for a loss of 4. And that's not even the same play I was talking about earlier where he had the hustle tackle for yards. But then the very next play after that loss of 4 that he caused by pushing the guard 5 yards back behind the line of scrimmage, the very next play, he beat a lineman quickly enough to where he hit Drake May while Drake May was throwing the ball. And again, soon after that, they started double teaming him because I'm sure at a certain point they were afraid of him hurting Drake May. How bad? I think it was KJ Henry the way that he hurt Jacoby Brissett. I would have too. I would have been like, all right, man, this is out of control. I mean, John Ridgway and KJ Henry, I would say, are easily my 2 first half MVPs, and I would probably name them my overall game MVPs as well. If I could give out 2 MVPs, I'd probably give them both to KJ Henry and John Ridgway. May give the third one to Trace McSorley because he balled, man. I'm not gonna lie. Again, he's not making the team, but he balled. And shouts out to Mitch Tisler because he said, I know folks are concerned about the Commanders' offensive line, but after watching half a quarter of this Pats group, the Commanders' O-line looks like all pros. It could always be worse, basically, is what he's saying. Shouts out to JP Finley because he brings up another great point as well. This Pats O-line is so bad that I'm not even sure how good of an eval it is for the Commanders' D-line. They should be winning, and they are, and it's just like, I mean, what can we really take away from it? Are the Patriots O-line that bad, or is our backup defensive line that good, or is it a mix of both more than likely? And again, that was the Patriots starting offensive line versus our backup D-line, not one starter. And so I was scared for Drake May myself at a certain point. And then the Jamin Davis situation, before we leave the defensive line part of this is a tricky one, man, because he was making some good plays today. But on the other side, he was making them in the fourth quarter while he was out there against the backups of the backups. So I'm not sure if he's safe or not, to be honest. I really don't know. I personally have seen enough flashes to keep him. Like, if it were up to me, he would make this team. But I'm not sure if this coaching staff feels the same. He was making plays out there. He was having an impact. But again, he was out there with the backups of the backups. Then linebacker-wise, I mean, I didn't really have any specific takeaways from any particular player. I just know in that first half, the linebackers that were out there looked really slow. Now, granted, they were all backups, but still, we are just one injury away from one of those guys having to play for us on Sundays. Anthony Pittman looks slow. I know he's going to make this team because he's a special teams ace, but as a linebacker, I don't love it. Cornerback-wise, Noah Igbenogany had a rough day. I mean, one of those drafts in the first half was like pretty ugly coverage-wise. And then he missed a tackle later on in the day as well. So our secondary in general, really, though, even outside of just Noah Igbenogany, struggled with tackling all game, honestly. Man, actually, this secondary really struggled with tackling all off-season, for real, all preseason, to be honest with you. Even though 90% of the time it was backups, but still something concerning. Then moving on to Tariq Castro-Fields, he looked really good last week, but then he didn't look good tonight from the plays I noticed. But maybe he was playing well at times, the times that I didn't notice. That's just the nature of the cornerback position. Usually if you notice them, that means they're not looking good. But from what I noticed, he didn't look good from the times that I've noticed him, man. It didn't look too good. Then Chiggy Anusium, another guy that had a pretty good preseason game last week and then just had some bad plays today, so I don't know there as well. And then shouts out to at Commander's Realm for this one, because this is funny, but I agree. Hard to believe we made it through an entire summer without signing Danny Johnson once. That must mean it is a new era in town, and I'm going to let you know now, that is the Mike Sanderstill effect. And it is a new regime, so it's still pretty funny, but I'm pretty sure Mike Sanford still had all to deal with the fact that we didn't necessarily need to go get a Danny Johnson again. Seems like we always end up cutting them November through the off season at some point and then bringing them back sometime in August or September. That just seems to be the rotation, the life cycle of the Danny Johnson experience. But this time around, don't necessarily need them. Now moving on to safety, I guess I'm going to have to go back and look at the tape some more, but I didn't like what I saw from Derek Forrest, man. It seemed like he was just always out of position. I'm rooting for him, but I didn't like it. Tyler Owens, I didn't necessarily notice him on defense today. I didn't necessarily see him flash. I'm going to have to go check him out because y'all know that's one of the players I'm rooting for the most to make this team. It's been Tyler Owens and Armani Rogers from the jump since before training camp. Armani Rogers is gone. Now I'm left with Tyler Owens, and I believe he did make enough plays on special teams. We're about to get to that. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and go to special teams right now. And first of all, to start off the game, Jeremy Reeves and Tyler Owens combined for a very big hit, the initial kickoff to start the game. I thought the team would have thrived off of that initial intensity too, man, but they didn't. It took until Trace McSorley came into the game in the second half for this team to show any real spirit. But under normal circumstances, the hit that Jeremy Reeves and Tyler Owens combined for in that first kickoff to set the game, I feel like that would have set the tone in a normal game, and the defense would have came onto the field with some energy. I guess the backups didn't, or at least the back seven, because the D-line came out balling immediately. Possession one, but that back seven, I don't know. They did not receive that energy from that Tyler Owens and Jeremy Reeves hit. Speaking of Tyler Owens, man, he was a presence on special teams today. Now, I did notice that. One of the Patriots returners called a fair catch in a situation where if it were most other players that were the gunner instead of Tyler Owens coming down that field, he probably would have tried him. Maybe not even called the fair catch and seen like, okay, maybe I can return this. But Tyler Owens got down there so fast and so aggressively that returner basically made a business decision. And that holds weight, man. That matters. The coaches notice things like that. And then shouts out to my boy Aaron King during the live chat, during the live stream, for pointing out the fact that they even had Tyler Owens back there to potentially return that 64-yard attempt from Joey Sly. I would have loved to have seen what he could done with that, because I would argue he's the most athletic freak that we have on the team. So that would have been really interesting. I've never seen or heard about him returning kicks. I would have loved to have seen that. Then shouts out to Ben Standick for pointing this out. He said Casimir Allen with the first punt return chance. Good job of faking the fair catch as the ball went into the end zone behind him. That was a very nuanced thing for him. That's a positive in his category. Showing a firm grasp of the role in all ways goes a long way towards him securing the gig, not to mention just a roster spot. But again, I don't think he's done enough as a receiver to make this team, but he's showing some nuance in that return game. We'll see. The Nick Whiteside, the only thing I have to say about him is that he terribly mismanaged a punt and lost track of the ball, which led to a touchback instead of downing it at like the 2-yard line. Like he was the gunner one of those plays where we were punting the ball. Tressway punted it really far beautifully, and the ball bounced up a little bit. Like he put a good little spin on it. It wasn't a perfect spin for it to bounce backwards, but it went up. And if Nick Whiteside just were able to find the ball, he probably could have downed it at the 2, but ended up going into the end zone for a touchback. And then, I know a lot of y'all were probably thinking the same thing, but dog, at a certain point in that game, I was wondering, we traded a 7th round pick for a kicker and we're not going to get to see him kick? And we didn't end up seeing him get even attempt the kick until after halftime. And, we couldn't even get a PAT out of the guy. The offense was so bad. Again, we couldn't evaluate the receivers, running backs, nor the kickers. Especially that first half, man, it was terrible. I don't even know what we could really take. It's almost like throw away your notes for the offense that first half. But his first kick was good. He had a 34-yard attempt, which took us to, we were losing the 7-3 because of it. And it was a 14-play, 54-yard drive that he was able to, give us some points off of. It would have been nice if Jaden Daniels could have gotten the same favor from Riley Patterson last week against the Dolphins with the drives he was putting together. Then K. York later on made his second kick. It was a 55-yard drive, and he ended up with a 33-yard field goal, which ended up we were losing by 10-6 at that point. Then he went 3 for 3 of kicks, made all 3 of his kicks, and I really want to point out the fact that they were all like dead down the middle. So that's very encouraging. All of the kicks were like in the 30s, but that's still noteworthy that, you know, he was making all of them. I'm really appreciative of the fact that he made all of his kicks, all of his regular kicks, and all of his extra points, man. He was 2 of 2 for field goals, and then he was 2 of 2 for extra points. And John Kahn brings up a good point. We can excel for now. He's better than what we've had in Ramiz Ahmed and Riley Patterson, but we'll see what he actually looks like in real regular season games. Better than anything we had, but I'm not sure if it's good enough. We'll see. Then shouts out to everybody else for their reviews. You know, I try to, you know, if anybody shares their review of what they saw from the game, try to give y'all that at the end of the video to give y'all a reason to stay. And I want to also give these guys the spotlight and shout them out. Shouts out to George Carmi at GCarmi21 on Twitter. Make sure you follow him on Twitter and subscribe to all his YouTube channels and everything. He does content with Big Doug and Mark Bullock and things. Great. He said heading into halftime, so this is a first half assessment. And I feel like this is important because that first half was difficult to assess. He said Jamin Davis had a good tackle coming off the edge, showing a little bit of substance. He's probably going to stick with the team. Interesting. KJ Henry exploited the poor offensive line play of New England, had a good sack. Then he said linebackers Pittman and Walker were arriving to the right location but not finishing. Michael Dieter remained at center with Strongberg at right guard. Interesting. Cole Turner had shaky play with at least one catch he should have made. Forrest and Owens are starting safeties out there with the backup defense, and Defoe played a lot of single high. So that was there. Even though he didn't necessarily have a good game, they asked a lot of him to play single high free safety. That's the most difficult safety you can play. You got to be really rangy and instinctual to do that. He also said Forrest can still hit. He brought the popcorn on a couple of catches. So hey, I appreciate that. Shouts out to that. Witt sent Defoe on a blitz off the edge as well, so they're utilizing him in a lot of different ways. He made some hits. Now granted, he wasn't necessarily great in coverage, but again, they were asking him to be a single high free safety. That's difficult. They even asked him to blitz at a certain point in time. So I mean, maybe that shows that he probably will make the team because they like to use him in a lot of different ways. And then of course, Noah Igbenogany struggled with tackling. Fedarian Mathis played a few series, but Ridgeway outperformed him. Again, Fedarian Mathis was great, but Ridgeway was just even better. McNichol, C-Rod, and Wiley all finished their runs with power. They all look good. Commander secondary depth is looking real shaky, and Joey Sly is still cursed at Commander's Field. I appreciate that breakdown from my boy George Carmi. Then you have Grant Paulson. He said the players who helped themselves tonight: Martavis Bryant, Fedarian Mathis, Mitchell Tinsley, and Michael Wiley. Now, I'm going to have to go back and look at the tape because I didn't feel like Mitchell Tinsley necessarily did enough to make the team, but he definitely helped his stock today. And then he said players who needed a bigger night: Cole Turner and Bryson Tremaine. I hate to see it with Bryson Tremaine. Then you have my boy Mason Kinahan on Twitter as well. He said biggest risers and followers against the Patriots: the risers, Mitchell Tinsley, KJ Henry, Fedarian Mathis, Michael Wiley, and Trace McSorley. Fallers: Cole Turner, Kazma Allen, defensive tackling, and penalties. I mean, pretty much all the same things in general. Then Son Fortier brings up a good point. He said one big question: will any Commanders cuts get claimed? Every year we talk about the right, to keep players and things like that, but I can't remember the last time one of the cuts enticed another team. That's a good point. Every time we're worried about guys getting cut and going to another team, they usually don't. So everybody, when we see these cuts happening on Tuesday, just, don't panic, because we may end up getting a lot of these guys back onto the practice squad anyway. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, Dan Quinn addressed the media after the game, and he said some interesting things. First of all, he said that it was a cool moment for Trace McSorley, of course, who grew up in the DMV, and Martavis Bryant, who has had a long road to get to this point, for both of those guys to connect on a touchdown. Completely agree there. I love that. Then you also had Dan Quinn saying that he felt like Fedarian Mathis had great energy throughout the game. So he's taking notice of the fact that Fedarian Mathis had a good game. Maybe it was enough to not only catch the head coach's eye, but to make the team. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, shouts out to Mike Swanson for pointing out the fact that he said Jaden Daniels just won this old PR guy over. I've seen literally thousands of interviews where guys end the sentence with man. Daniels, talking to Melissa started to say man, called himself, and then said ma'am. Great work by you, Jaden. Have a terrific career. He was raised right, man. That's all I can say. Jaden Daniels is the guy. I love it. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know if you feel about everything discussed in the video. Please still follow that like like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, man. I really appreciate y'all, man, big time for the support. Everybody that pulled up and left a like, everybody that engaged in the chat, whether I agreed or disagreed, I just love the engagement in the chat, man. I absolutely love it. It just makes watching football so much more fun, even when people are disagreeing. If anything, that may even make it a little bit more fun. And then also, shouts out to all of y'all that have been donating to the channel, whether it be through the Cash App, through the super chat during the live streams, or even through the super chat in videos, man. Really big shouts out to y'all, man. Matter of fact, before I leave, I want to make sure I shout out my boy that left a super chat, my boy Jeremiah T.5978, for a big time donation. All he wanted to do was say thanks, but in my video talking about how they tore down the Sean Taylor statue and how John Dodson said he can't wait to play us this season, he donated a whole donation just to say thanks in a video, not even, I mean, in a situation where he wouldn't even necessarily be acknowledged. So I really appreciate that. I really try to make sure I go out of my way to acknowledge and thank everybody that donates. If it's during a live stream, I'm gonna thank you right then and there. Cash App, wherever, PayPal, shouts out to all of y'all. But if it's through a video and I'm not live streaming, I'm gonna make sure the next video, the next time I live stream, I go out of my way to say thank you. Now, of course, let me know in the comment section. Make sure you leave a comment and let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. What were your takeaways from the preseason game? Do you agree or disagree with any of my points? Let me know who you feel like will make the team, who will not make the team, all of that type of stuff. Give me a stock up and stock down on the players that you notice the most, all of that type of stuff. And again, do not leave this video out leaving a like. I'm gonna catch y'all later. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.